So here is probably the thing that most students get worked up about, that they see this and get very intimidated, and it really is fairly simple, but you just have to spend some time with it. So I recommend coming in and actually touching the board and seeing the board, because it's really the best way to learn it. A switcher is essentially a big kind of remote control. There are plenty of inputs into it, and then its output becomes the stream of programming that you want, right? So essentially it's live editing. So those of you that might have used an editor before, right, that this is kind of editing on the fly in a production. So this is the difference between, say, a multicam production versus like Saturday Night Live versus a single cam such as Modern Family. And so here we have the switcher, and it's divided up into different parts. The first thing that I want to call your attention to is the row here, and we call this a bus. This is a bus. On the bottom, which is all green, as you see, if it doesn't matter what I press, is the preview bus, which means it shows up on the monitor in the preview window. Next to that, or on top of that, we have the program bus, which is red, which means whatever is that I touch goes directly on air. So generally when we're operating the switcher, the way that we want to operate the switcher is essentially you put something on program or on preview, and then you use the transition bus, which we'll talk about in a minute, to get it to program. You never really want to what we call hot punch and just start taking sources, right? That it's much easier to see on the preview window what it is before you take it on air. So preview, program. As we move along, we have the transition bus. The transition bus really allows us to look at transitions. And here we have take and auto. And essentially take means it's a cut. I can cut between one source and the other source. Auto allows me to have an actual definitive range. So right now it is set for a 1 second transition. So it'll take 29.97 frames to go from one source to the other. Now, of course, that's variable. That's what the rate's for. I can make this as quick as 10 seconds or 10 frames. I can make this seconds long, right? Now, of course, if I want to manually do it, I can, and that's what we call the T-bar. So if you move the T-bar, right, or you grab the T-bar, and you don't have to jam it. It's not something that is, it's very fluid. So you just move it from one source to the other. So this allows you to do, essentially, if you go into After Effects and you learn Easy Ease, this is where you have that variable fade where you go a little bit quicker and then you can slow down, or you can go slow and then quick it. Or of course you can try to go at a steady speed, something like that. So that's the T-bar. You might recognize the T-bar from movies like A New Hope from Star Wars. The T-bar was the lever that they used on the Death Star to destroy the planet Alderaan. So the next thing we have here is we have DSK1 and DSK2. These are downstream keyers. So this is after you go through the entire switcher, at the very end, you have a downstream keyer where you can put in graphics or anything else, and you can put it in here. And as you see, there's a take button and an auto button. Much like down here, there's a take and auto. It does the same thing, okay? When you're doing this sort of thing, you can actually what we call latching by changing different things, right? By using these different configurations. Background is what changes preview to program. If background's not lit up, I can hit, so if I go here, I can hit take all day, and you'll notice here that the things don't change, whereas if I have background, they change. This essentially is an on-off button. So if I have DSK1 on and I latch it together, this is going to change the background and it's going to turn off DSK1. Now if I press all three of these, and I have DSK2 on, you'll see that I'm going to change the background, I'm going to turn on DSK1, and I'm going to turn off DSK2. And that's how we use that. The next button in the transition you see is what's been lit up as fade. That means that the transition is going to be a dissolve or a fade. If I change it to trans, it's going to change into transformation, which in the most case means wipes. This switcher has plenty of wipes. There are at least 50 or 60 different types of wipes that range from basketballs to sheep to a clock wipe to blinds to just general wipes. And that's the difference between transition and hitting auto and a fade. And finally on this bus we have the fade to black button. And of course this is not the best way that it's set up. Usually the fade to black button is used as an emergency. And here we have to hit shift and hit fade to black. And that means no matter what I press on this board, I'm going to get nothing but black, right? And so the idea behind this is something goes wrong, you can immediately go to black and you can figure out what's going wrong without having a signal go to air. It's also a great way to end a show by just hitting fade to black. These are the options for this, but it's a little tricky because you actually have to hit shift in this case to get fade to black. Next we have the utility bus. Now I showed you earlier the downstream keyer 1 and downstream keyer 2, and I told you that it can be any number of things, and that's true. So the question is, how do you change it? We use the utility bus right here, which is the blue lights, to show you how to change that. Here's what we call the utility delegate so that I can change DSK1 or DSK2. And I have all of my sources here. So I can change DSK1 to be a buffer. I can change it to be the graphics. If I need to do graphics 2, again I need to hit switch graphics and it'll light up. So see when I hit shift, it's lit up there. I can change it to the DDRs or I can change it to any of the cameras. And so I can lay anything on top of my main feed. And again, I can do the same thing for DSK2. And that's what the utility bus does. We don't tend to use FX. We don't tend to use aux out. Next, we have the media players. The media players allow you to play different sort of pieces out of the TriCaster, whether it be music or sound effects or video. And so here we have DDR1, DDR2, graphics, and sound. So I can control any of those by hitting play, which there's nothing loaded there, so it's not playing. I can advance or go to the next track, and I can do that for any of these things. I can also latch these, so maybe I want to play both video sources, or I want to play both video sources and a sound source. I can do all of that with the press of one button. To get out of latching, you just press one button. Next down here, the things that you'll see is loop, single, and autoplay. Loop, if I have loop done and I hit play, it will just constantly play the same source over and over again. If I have single turned off, it will loop the entire playlist over and over again. And if I have autoplay on, anytime that I take DDR1 to air, it's going to play. So if I hit stop and I take DDR1, you'll see that it automatically plays. Now, I don't like autoplay. It makes life simpler because it automatically does something, but the downside to autoplay is that when it's done playing, it automatically switches to whatever's on preview. So unless you're already that second step ahead, it's going to go to something that you might not be ready for. And that's the media players. Next we have the Emmies, and they're labeled up here. We have A and B. Essentially, A is always going to be your camera, and B is always going to be your background. So when setting up a key wall, you'll go to, and we can do it in preview. You can set it up so that your camera is camera 2, and maybe I want graphics as my background. That will allow me to show you camera 2 with graphics in the background. That's how we make a key wall. Here we also have different delegates because normally, and this is where you've seen fancy switchers that are rows and rows of buttons. Here, the Emmy is the same button, the same rows here, and we use this delegate to have Emmy 1, Emmy 2, Emmy 3, an ME4 instead of having layer, 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 layer. And those are the difference between the Emmies. Again, the Emmies are highly used for key walls and those sorts of things. And then finally we have the positioner. The positioner, for the most part, is important because we have to change things. When we are using virtual sets, sometimes we have to move MEA or MEB, which of course also comes back to this delegate of which ME that it's going to use. Or we might have to move our downstream keyer. Here it's pretty simple, position and scale. If I move this up or down or left or to diagonal, it moves it. I scale it by turning. I can also rotate in pretty much the z-axis here. I can crop a little bit of my image and then reset, which is really important because when something's gone missing or something, you can't find something, most likely someone has played with it. And so if you hit reset, it'll go back to its original form, to 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So those are the pieces of the switcher that we see. The other thing that's important is right up here is the record button. This allows you to record something so that when you're trying to do that, it's important. Understand that to stop recording, you need to hit Control Record. The idea behind this is that if you just hit record accidentally, that's cool, but you don't want to accidentally hit record again to turn it off. And so it makes you do 2 fingers to make sure that you for sure want to actually stop recording. And that's essentially the TriCaster in a brief. Again, this isn't really complicated, but it's a little foreign and it takes some getting used to. But once you get used to it, it's pretty simple.